Okay, Acts chapter 2, beginning at verse 42, we find here a description, a profound description of what was going on in this early church. It says, they, and that's the church, the first believers, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Here we have a picture of these first and early Christians giving themselves away, giving away their time, giving away their love, giving away even their money as they supported each other and served God together. And that word, together, really I think is the key word in this passage. I want you to look with me at verse 44. It says, all the believers were together. And if you look at verse 46, it says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. And that verse continues, it says, they broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And anyway, this concept, together, I fear that I will not do an adequate job of explaining to you how profound this was. That they were together. They were together in every way. It wasn't just ancillary or some side product. I mean, it was at the heart of who they were. Just look again with me at verse 46. This was something that was daily. Every day, they continued to meet together in the temple courts. So every day there was public worship. No one was forcing them to go. They just, with gladness of heart, they were meeting together in the temple, and they were holding public worship services every single day. They were together in the worship of God. And I don't know about you, but you'd think to yourself, well, if they're gathering to worship every single day, they're probably getting sick of each other. No. And beyond what was happening in the public, in the worship of God in public in the temple courts, the rest of the verse, they broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts. It's like these people couldn't get enough of each other. They were truly together. As soon as worship was over, they're like, hey, come on over to my house. And they continued to eat bread together, and they continued to fellowship together, and they continued to worship and praise. And I mean, both in public, in large forums, in private, in small groups, and in communities. I mean, they were truly together. Like I said, I fear that today I won't communicate the profundity of what I'm saying. It wasn't just that they were, they happened to be, they were together in every way. I mean, even financially, look at verse 45. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had a need. I mean, they so loved each other, they so cared for each other, that if there was someone who had a need, someone would say, wow, what a privilege it is for me right now, because God's given me this thing in order to sell it so that I can meet this need. And I mean, their hearts were one. They were together as a community. And let me tell you, what's really profound about this, you know the phrase, birds of the feather flock together? You might think to yourself, well, somehow they held everything in common because they were like each other. No. This community was so diverse, so different from one another, every different race, every different ethnicity, every different language, every different background, every different age, every different educational level. I mean, go back to chapter 2. Look with me beginning in verse 9 through verses 9 through 11. There's a list of all the places that these people came from. Parthians and Medes and Elamites from Mesopotamia and Judea and Cappadocia. I mean, okay, just look at verse 11. It says, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs. Okay, here in this community, there were Jews and Arabs who were together. I mean, you just think about the world today. all the races and ethnicities that do not get along. People were speaking all kinds of different languages. There was every social barrier, and no, those social barriers were brought down somehow. They were together. As you continue to read through the book of Acts, you'll see this. It wasn't just that there were people from Europe and Asia and Africa, from the Middle East, from Jerusalem. There were different ethnicities, and that was all broken down. But different educational levels. There were people who were highly educated. There were people who had almost no education. And every different social standing. You'll find out here that there were people who were incredibly poor. And then there were people who had extra properties and could sell homes that were incredibly wealthy. These people were different ages. There was both men and women together. And, okay, let me make this observation. So here, I'm going to put a list of things on the screen here. Racial tensions, class warfare, greed, hatred, animosity. Would you agree with me that these are problems in the world today? Okay, right? Would you agree with me these are the problems of the United States? Okay, would you agree with me that these are problems of basically every city? Would you agree with me these are the problems of like every high school? Right? You remember being in high school, there's all these different groups and cliques and people aren't together. And let me tell you, this is every civilization, every city, every government is passing laws, is reorganizing itself to try somehow to solve these problems, right? I mean, we're trying to organize ourselves, we're spending money, okay, is there a law that can solve these problems? Is there a political party that can solve these problems? Is there a leader? Is there a way to organize ourselves? If there were, we wouldn't have these problems. And let me tell you, these problems, it's like they magnify across the world. So I can add to this list poverty, genocide, wars, great wealth differences. These are the problems of humanity. And I don't know about you, but it's profound. Here, no law could solve it. No leader has conquered it. No amount of guilt or persuasion has overcome it. But here, in this early community, social barriers broken down, they were together. Classes broken down, they were together. Educational levels broken down, they were together. Backgrounds, ages, you name it, every social wall came down. They were together daily, publicly, privately. They were together financially. They were together. That's the first thing I want to point out about this passage. Now, here's the second thing I want to point out. This passage is framed by, I think, something that's it's an important statement. You shouldn't miss it. So I didn't read it, but verse 41, which is right before this passage, it comes at the conclusion of Peter's sermon. People are cut to the heart. They turn to Jesus. Anyway, verse 41 says, those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. So that's at the front part of the passage. This church is growing in the most dynamic way. And then look at the end of verse 47. We did read this, the second half of verse 47. Says, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Not only was this togetherness, this community, this fellowship so profound, but it was compelling somehow. Outsiders were looking in there saying, wow, I want that. I want to join that. That's unique. I've never seen that before. And people were literally leaving their old lives behind and joining in. And I guess how to describe it, in this early church, there was an exponential growth. They were growing in the most profound ways. And by the way, it doesn't stop here. By the time we get to chapter 4, we're only 4 chapters in. Now there's 5,000 people who are chronicled. And as this book goes forward, there's going to be more and more and more and more. And why? Why is Christianity growing? And I think that this passage gives us at least a window into why that is, some insight. This community, there was something absolutely compelling about it that reflected Jesus. And let me just put my finger on it. There was a love. There was a generosity where people were giving up their time, were giving up their things. They were serving each other. They were devoted to each other, and people took notice. It was remarkable. I'm just going to show you some things from church history. I started asking myself this question: why did the church grow? And there's a lot of scholars who have a ton of opinions. And as I dove into it, I said, wow, there's something really remarkable in church history. I came across this just a couple of weeks ago. There was, and it's one of the first pictures that we get of Christianity from outsiders that's written in the 2nd century. There was a fellow named Lucian of Samosata. He lived from 125 to 180 AD. He was a Syrian man who was a cynic and a satirist, and he actually wrote a piece about the stupidity of Christians. He hated Christians, and he wrote this satirical piece, and it's about this man named Peregrinus, and it's called The Passing of Peregrinus. And what he does is he writes about this character, Peregrinus, and what Peregrinus does is he worms his way into the Christian community and fakes being a Christian in order to take advantage of them. And so what Lucian sees is he says, wow, these Christians, they care about each other so much that if someone comes in and even they're faking it and they say, wow, I'm just in a lot of trouble, I'm in need, people are like selling their stuff and handing money over anyway. Lucian, he makes fun of all of it. I just want to show you a quote from this essay he wrote. I think it's so profound. And keep in mind, like I said, he hated Christians, was writing to make fun of them. This is what he said: "The Christians, worship a man to this day, the distinguished personage who introduced their novel rites and was crucified on that account. You see, these misguided creatures start with the general conviction that they are immortal for all time, which explains their contempt of death and voluntary self-devotion, which are so common among them." You see what he's saying? He's saying, these poor creatures, they think they have something called eternal life, and so they don't care this much about the world. They're willing to just hand their stuff over because this world doesn't mean very much to them. And under his breath, he's like, aren't they stupid? Here's the rest of the quote. He says, "And then it was impressed on them by their original lawgiver that they're all brothers. From the moment they're converted and deny the gods of grace and worship their crucified sage and live after his laws. All this they take quite on faith, with the result that they despise all worldly goods alike, regarding them merely as common property." And he writes about how Peregrinus just worms his way in and they just hand their stuff over to him. Ha, 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 ha. And, he meant it to mock Christians. To me, it says something about those who are followers of Jesus. This early church, they were so loving. They were so generous. They were so sincere that even someone who came into their ranks who might be taking advantage of them, they were willing to serve that person as well. And although, Lucian's making fun of them, to me, there's something compelling. It gives you a picture of what this early church was like. Another angle, there was a fellow named Julian. He was the Roman emperor in the 4th century. And what was happening is that Christianity was growing and growing and growing and growing and was about to overtake all the traditional religion of Rome. And Julian actually got upset about it, and he wanted to restore the ancient religion of Rome. And so what he decided is he actually set out and he wanted to have a campaign against Christians to turn people away from Christianity, back to ancient Roman religion. Anyway, this is what he wrote, and I think it's also remarkable. He said, "Nothing has contributed to the progress of the superstition of the Christians as their charity to strangers. The impious Galileans provide not only for their own poor, but for ours as well." You know what he's saying? He's like, look, if we stand a chance at restoring the ancient Roman religion, we're going to have to do way better than they are. They don't only take care of their own, but they're taking care of ours as well, and shame on us. Come on, everybody. It gives you a sense of these early Christians. They were so caught up with the message of Jesus that, even outsiders who hated them, who wished the world would be rid of them, couldn't help but notice their love, their generosity, their spirit toward one another and even toward outsiders. As I was reading, I actually came across, and you can Google this, I hope you do, PBS at one point did a special, and they called it The Great Appeal. This was their question: what did Christianity offer its believers that made it worth social estrangement, hostility from neighbors, and possible persecution? And you realize that, right? The people who first became Christians, they had it tough. Often they'd lose their job, they were socially ostracized. Oftentimes they were physically tortured, sometimes even put to death. And PBS, they actually decided, like, how did Christianity even grow under those conditions? What was it? And they gathered a bunch of scholars, most of them not even Christian scholars, and they asked them this question. And I mean, just Google it because it's fascinating to read what they wrote. There's one scholar in particular, he's from the University of Texas in Austin. His name's L. Michael White. And I found it so interesting what he wrote. This is what he said. He said at least one of the reasons was the plague. And he talked about how in the early centuries of Christianity, plague just spread all throughout the Roman Empire. And what was happening is that those who were non-Christians, when their relatives got the plague, they actually put them out in the street. I mean, man, okay, I can't take that chance, out. But Christians not only took care of those who were sick in their own families, but when people were put out in the street, they would welcome them into their home as well and show them love and kindness. And what he said is, he said, although the plague was terrible, the life expectancy increased when you did the basic things like kept them hydrated, kept them warm with a blanket. And he said Christians did that kind of thing, and as a result, they didn't die as fast as non-Christians. And he said when you have that, where the Christian population is not dying as fast as the non-Christian population, then what happens is the non-Christian population dies quicker, and the Christian population died slower, and eventually, I mean, think about what he's saying. He's saying, listen, because Christians were willing not only to take care of their own sick, but the sick of others, they didn't die as quick. And as a result, there became more of them. That's interesting. But I'd like to show you this quote. I found this so interesting, what he said. He said, in the year 251, right at the time of the persecution of Decius, we have a register of the church at Rome, which says they had 46 presbyters and 56 exorcists and doorkeepers, and a number of other people that were cataloged, 7 of this and 7 of that. Quite a lot of people are in this catalog. In other words, they found, just names with categories written down. And then he says, at the end, it says over 1,500 widows and needy persons on the roster of the church at Rome. That is people, women, who are being taken care of by the church. What a remarkable just piece of history. Then in this church, while Rome was persecuting them, in other words, they were losing their jobs, they were socially ostracized, they had no money, oftentimes they were being put to death. In the church, they were keeping a record of people they could help, and that record was so long that they were actively helping out more than 1,500 poor people in that city. And I don't know about you, but there's something just compelling about that. These Christians, they were different than the world. They were loving in a way that's profound, and they were generous in ways that, it stretches our imagination. This was at the heart of this church, and it's why they were attractive, it's why they were unique, and people felt so compelled that they were willing to undergo persecution and social ostracization to just say, they have something, and I want it. Okay, I want to point out one more thing. Look with me at verse 42. It says, that's these early Christians, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. That they were devoted to learning, they were devoted to love, and they were devoted to worship. We saw that every single day in public and in private. Look down with me at verse 47. In the middle of verse 46, it says, they broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Now I want you to see these words, especially the first two, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. It says the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Worship, there it is again. And you can't miss it as you read through this passage. Every single day, public worship. And then in homes, praising God and worshiping together. And again, this isn't something that's just a side remark. I think it's actually at the core. And I'd like to just explore that a little more. How it is that worship of Jesus produced this kind of community that nothing else in the world has. And, okay, how I'm going to get at this, it might at first be a little weird, but at least I'm going to do my best to bring you back around. This will either work or it won't work. It sort of worked in the first service, I think. Here we go. So here's my statement. I would say this, and we'll see if you can buy in. The more beautiful something is, the more glorious, the more profound, the more joy it produces in us, the more we need to draw other people into that appreciation of it for our joy to be complete. So the more beautiful it is, the more we're going to want to share it with people around so that, our joy can't be complete until we do. I'll give you some, these are little mundane things that just happened through my day yesterday. So I get up Saturday morning. I always do this. I play tennis on Saturday morning, and I don't know if you were up early on Saturday morning. We get up and we start at 6:30. But there's just four of us guys, and we kept remarking to each other, man, what a beautiful day. And it was. Just a beautiful morning for tennis. The weather was perfect. There wasn't too much wind. And it's interesting, not only were we appreciating ourselves privately, but at least 3 or 4 times we had to out loud say it to each other. We couldn't just keep it to ourselves. We had to say out, man, it sure is a beautiful morning. Okay, as the day went on, we wound up a little later in the afternoon going to a park. And we were with some other families and people we knew, people we didn't know. As we were at the park, it wasn't just once, it was several times. Different people kept saying, boy, we sure did get a great day today. Florida, it's paradise. The sun was shining, the weather was perfect, the kids were having fun, and we just, wow, what a beautiful day. And I'm sure this must be the case. You see the kind of sunsets we often have in Florida? The colors that paint the sky. When you see that and there's someone with you, do you just quietly? No, almost every time, wow, look at that. Why do we do that? We do that because our joy isn't totally complete until we're sharing that, until we're drawing others in, until we're sharing that joy, and then our joy somehow gets fuller and the appreciation of it gets bigger. The more beautiful it is, the more profound it is, the more we do that kind of thing. Okay, personal example from the week. So if you know me, then one of the things you'll know about me is that I love baseball, and particularly the Chicago Cubs. I just really, really love them. And I have for a long, long time. In fact, I'm going to show you a picture. This picture's from 1985. My parents, and they're here, so they'll remember this too, they took us from Northwest Montana to Chicago because my brothers and I just loved the Cubs so much, they wanted to take us to a game. And here's the picture of the three of us. I'm in the middle. There we are, and from that time on, having been at that game, it's like, although the Cubs haven't been good, and we all know it, so you don't have to tell me, I've just loved the Cubs. And so as a result, I follow them, I watch their games, and even though I'm here in Mets and Yankees territory, I don't hesitate to say I love the Cubs. Well, anyway, here's the thing. If you know me at all, you also know that this is true about me. You see the picture there with my brothers. I grew up in a family of just boys. Now I only have daughters. And I have been dismayed that when it comes to choosing what to turn on television, they would rather watch something like this. Okay, so the Cubs are on, but they want to watch, and here's the thing, I convince them that we should turn the Cubs on, but do they stay there and watch it with me? No, I mean, they leave. And so most of the time, there I am by myself, and I still love the Cubs, but I mean, there's no one to root with me, and I feel bothered by that. Anyway, I finally decided to do something about it. So last year, and some of you will even remember this because I think I told you about it, I took my oldest daughter to Chicago, and we went to a Cubs game. And I did my best to tell her all the players on the field, and we went to this game, and there we were at Wrigley the same way I was. Anyway, she got to know the players' names, and now she's, convinced my second daughter, and she knows all the players' names. Well, I don't know if you follow the Cubs or not, but if you do, then you know this last week, their star pitcher, Jake Arrieta, threw a thrilling no-hitter. Yeah, thank you. Right, there I am, and it's the most, I'm having the best time, and guess who's by my side? My two oldest daughters. Now my wife is in the background, she's saying, "Go to bed, kids." And I'm like, "No, don't, just stay right here." and anyway, we watched it clear till it was ended, and when I'm jumping up and down in my living room, there they are as well. And let me tell you, I am enjoying it all the more because I have my daughters right there rooting for the Cubs with me. You see this, right? In fact, here's the picture. Yeah, thank you. There we are. This is my strategy, and it worked. Okay. The more beautiful, the more profound, the more joy-giving something is, the more you're going to want to draw other people into that. You never enjoy it yourself as fully when you're alone. Whether it's a sunset, whether it's the weather, whether it's a baseball game, the Super Bowl. Do people like watching the Super Bowl alone, or do they have something called Super Bowl parties? Or book clubs. Why do book clubs exist, right? You read a book, and you enjoy it. That's not half as good. If you're a book reader, you want to discuss that with someone, right? And so you want to enjoy that with other people, and you don't enjoy the book as much until you've talked it over with other people. Only when other people are brought into the joy. Art. If you want to see art and enjoy art, you'll go to a museum. It's so much better when you go with someone else. You see something, "Hey, look at this. Wow, isn't this..." Here, a little over a year ago, my wife and I, for our anniversary, went to New York City, and we were just having a good time for our anniversary. We decided to go to the Museum of Modern Art. And so we go into this museum, and some of the stuff is just weird. But as we're going along, we were up on one of the floors, and finally we just walk around the corner, and there it is, Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. And it's just hanging there, right on the wall. There's nothing, one of the most famous paintings in the world. Anyway, there I am with my wife, and of course, I hand her my phone, and she takes a picture of me. So there it is, right? And okay, now that you've seen that picture, I want to explain to you why Facebook, Instagram, what causes that to work? At least one of the reasons why people are on it. So there it is. I'm with Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. And I'm there with my wife, and that's great, but what do I want to do? You get out your phone, you post it to Facebook, pretty soon people start liking it, now you can heart it and everything else, right? And somehow the fact that I can now share that with more people makes my enjoyment of the moment better, more joyful, more profound. Do you see where I'm going with this? The more beautiful something is, the more glorious, the more profound, the more joy-giving, the more you'll enjoy it if other people are drawn in. And, okay, weather, Cubs, football, books, art, nothing is more beautiful than the message of Jesus' death and resurrection. Once you understand it, once you know it, once you've heard it, that the God of the universe who created us, only to experience us basically spitting in his face and saying, "We don't want anything to do with you," came down, descended to serve us, and finally died on a cross in order to forgive us, to bring us back to him. I mean, the incredible and profound love that's there. And you just think about, the accounts of the cross. You know, there was a sign made for above his head that was meant to mock him. As he was hanging there in torture, people were passing by and hurling insults at him. As he writhed in agony and pain and finally took the burden of all our sin upon him and was punished by God himself for the things we had done. You know, he said things like this: Father, forgive them. Where you might expect that the God of the universe would come as a judge or a warrior to conquer, he came as a servant to love, to forgive. This is what I'm trying to say. There is nothing more beautiful than this message, than that I can be forgiven and set free and be given a new life. There's nothing more profound than that. And, it just changes everything. You know, if you realize that the God of the universe forgave me, then when there's someone that I don't understand or I don't get, or they're different from me, or they have different opinions, or they've done something to harm me, or I even perceive that they're my enemy somehow, you know, when I was God's enemy and he treated me like this, you know what that means? It means I can't treat people as enemies anymore. I've got to forgive. I've got to love. I've got to let go. Or like this: when the God of the universe descended to serve us, when that impacts us, you know what it means? We can no longer condescendingly look down the nose at anyone else and think, oh, you're beneath me. So if God made himself beneath me, I can't treat anyone else as though they're beneath me. Do you see what it does? It draws people into community in a way that nothing else could. You see this. These were people of every different background and walk of life, every different race, ethnicity, every different language, every different class, every different gender, every different category of wealth. What else could produce this? Could guilt? Could a law? Could a political party? Could a governmental system? There's nothing but the beauty of Jesus, the glory of Jesus, the love of Jesus, the profundity of what he's done. As you understand it, you can't help but need a group like this to be drawn in so that your joy is made complete. This message automatically draws a community of people. And, okay, it's not just back then. Let's just do this. Would you do me a favor? Just stop looking at me and look around. Okay? In this room, there are people from every different walk and background of life. Different races. There's people of different ages. There's people of different educational levels. There's people of different wealth categories here. There's both the rich and the poor. You don't even have to look that far away. You will see someone that in this life you would otherwise have nothing to do with them, right? And here we are, together. This room is full of people we'd otherwise be irritated with. It might otherwise be our enemy, but we're not. We love each other. We're brothers and sisters. We're part of a family. And what has caused that? It's not guilt. No one's guilting you into being here. It's not a law. It's not a government. It's not a political party. It's the love of the message of Jesus Christ. It's that passion that fuels us. And to the extent that we grasp the beauty of this gospel, to the extent that we understand what God has done for us, we will automatically not only treat each other in far different ways, but will also together be drawn in for the joy of it in worship. And having thought about all that, if you're a person who's here today that just started to grasp, wow, there is something compelling here, there's only one appropriate way to finish today, and that's to just join together our hearts in worship.